Between Two COOs is a podcast where phenomenal chief operating officers from all sorts of companies come to share their insights, advice, and crazy stories. All right, hello and welcome to Between Two COOs. I'm your host, Michael Koenig, and I'm excited to welcome our guest, Justin Reilly, the innovative chief product officer at Tucows, a company that sits at the intersection of connectivity from domain names to Ting's wireless service and Ting's fiber internet. Justin focuses on building the next generation of consumer products, particularly where AI meets customer experience. Prior to joining Tucows, Justin was the head of product and customer experience innovation at Verizon and also founded several companies, including Focus Health, Gray 7 Labs, and Qster. Welcome, Justin. Thanks for being here. I'm excited to have you on.
Awesome to be here, Michael.
So it's worth noting that you're the first guest that we've had on that isn't a chief operating officer. And I really wanted to have you on to bring a different perspective to operations, particularly as it relates to the next gen of product and the intersection of customer experience and operations. But before we get into that, how'd you end up as the chief product officer at Tucows? What was your path?
It's a pretty windy road to get here. So if we go way back to university, I was playing college basketball, and I thought that when I graduated, I would be overseas playing. And my body had a different point of view, so my basketball career ended a bit sooner than maybe I had planned, and I kind of had to scramble and think about what I was going to do. Where all of my classmates were starting a company, going off to Goldman. I was the only person literally in my graduation line that had an entrepreneurship minor coming out of Wharton, and so I was kind of looking around, going, "Guess I'm the only one that doesn't know what I'm doing." And so what was great about that was I was at the intersection of like Web 2, right? So at Penn at the time, Venmo's being incubated, Warby Parker, Invite Media is getting ready to be gobbled up by Google, Milo becomes half.com. I mean, just an amazing set of things happening around me. And so I got into kind of social ad tech early on, and then started a few companies. One, kind of commerce social network. The second was a digital products company. I was consulting for a while after that last exit. And then Verizon called as they were kind of trying to pivot from becoming more of a, from being more of a like finance ops driven traditional telco into being a product company. And that's kind of how I ended up there. Amazing ride, kind of through the digital transformation journey, putting in the AI foundation there. And then I wanted to go tackle chronic illness with machine learning. It was something that's kind of near and dear to my heart. My sister's been dealing with an illness for a number of years, and we're kind of coming on the other side of that, which is really amazing. And one of the things that's true about folks with, invisible illnesses or nonlinear illnesses is that acute healthcare doesn't actually solve the problems for them, right? It's you come in, I see like Michael in this snapshot, but there's all these other things going on. So one of the things we were doing at Focus with ASAP and Dr. David Sontag at MIT was plotting that longitudinal health journey and using ML to fill in the gaps so that we actually know, okay, this is what actually happened and actually what was going on inside of Michael's body over the last 30 years, which is actually fairly deterministic and fairly predictive of the future. And then these wild folks in Toronto called and said, "Hey, we're disrupting telecom. Do you want to come do that?" And I said, "Tucows, I think I bought a domain name from you guys a while ago." And then obviously I had insight into what they were doing with Ting on the MVNO side in the US and starting to lay fiber throughout the United States. And it became a really interesting marriage. And the top, their top line values of believing in the open internet and leaning into it is really in lots of ways the diametric opposition of a lot of the trends that we're seeing, right, in big tech. And so it was just perfect. And before you knew it, I'd moved from Brooklyn to Toronto, and here we are.
How about that? That's quite the journey, and I suspect that you're probably the tallest guest that we've had on as well. So maybe I'm a little envious. But in terms of making the jump from health to internet, what was that like?
Well, in lots of ways, I spent the time between Verizon and Tucows, kind of retraining my brain to think about healthcare. And there are lots of components of of that industry that are similar, right? There's a lot of interoperability problems. There's a lot of kind of training and operations problems of how do you get a physician to follow a new workflow, which is, in lots of ways similar to how do you get a customer service agent to do a new thing so that now a new experience scales and you deliver more customer value. I would say the most frustrating thing in healthcare that's starting to be, I would say, maybe a losing, eroding trend in a positive way in telecom is that there's still huge moats around healthcare data and interoperability across the EMRs, and which is really basically the thing that holds up great data sharing in healthcare, in the particularly the United States. And in telecom, that's starting to, over the years will erode as we have 5G with ORAN and open radios and kind of a bunch of stuff that starts to happen when networks start acting like software. So I say all that to say, for me, moving through that, I would see a lot of trends that were like, okay, that makes sense. That's like this. And then I would see other things like, okay, how do I get a physician to follow a clinical decision make when I'm not clinical at all? And so it's definitely, kind of switching. And I remember when I got to Tucows, some of the language that I was using was like clinical, clinical product language, and people were just like, I don't know what this guy's talking about. It took me about 3 months to kind of put down those acronyms and come back into telecom and internet in a real way.
That's really interesting how it's the product experience that kind of ties those two pretty disparate industries together that you're bringing to internet and connectivity. So, throughout your time innovating on the product side, what surprised you about how product's role has evolved, particularly in business operations?
I would say the biggest thing that surprised me is how much further we're getting into the technology stack that impacts how businesses operate. So if you think about the digital transformation frame, right, over the last 10 or 15 years and all the conferences and all the capital being poured into it, it's really been at if you put it into thirds, right? In the stack, and the top of the stack is what touches the customer, and the bottom of the stack's as far back office as you can get, right? The systems of record. The vast majority of investment innovation has been on the first 70%. And so in that, you don't get too far into, there's pieces of business you kind of leave out of quote innovation or better product experience or whatever, right? And you can see this when you're like, man, customer service now has like a really great experience, and the customer has a new website or an app, but someone in finance or someone in operations or someone in field service management or whatever still has this like really hard to use experience. So the thing that most surprised me is how the next generation of product managers, I think the really good ones, are really gravitating towards that last 30% because there's a lot of work to be done there, and they're finding a lot of personal value and utility and excitement of solving those problems that maybe weren't as exciting to solve. They aren't as shiny as a new website or an app or a chatbot or a you know uh, blockchain NFT unicorn that does flips, right? But it's like, oh, the fixing this billing system, it's gonna really impact my five stakeholders internally, all of which have really terrible interfaces and really terrible inefficiency in the way that they operate the core pieces of the business. And so I would say that I think that's the thing that's most surprising is more folks gravitating towards. I think companies like Stripe really kickstarted that and saying we're going to make some of this stuff that seems complicated or seems old and crufty. We're going to make it great, and we're going to make it really easy, and it's going to be a fun thing to work on over time.
That's interesting. Now, Ting notably has amazing customer care and customer support. It's one of the things that y'all are best known for. You have a mantra for your team that you're competing against your customers' last best experience. Customer care is something that traditionally can fall under the purview of a chief operating officer. From a product standpoint, you can talk with someone instead of having to punch numbers through a directory. So how do you marry that intersection of tech, particularly AI, which I know you're really focused on, and the customer touch?
It's a great question. Most of the bad customer experiences, particularly in this space, are directly related to bad business decisions, right? So why is there an IVR that you have to punch a bunch of numbers? It's because the volume of calls trying to manually triage a terrible product decision. Full stop, right? If you look at these companies, they have billion, 2 billion, $3 billion cost centers in call center. And it's directly related to the fact that somewhere down the line, someone decided maybe we should put 6.5 million customers on one-to-one pricing. We're going to have, 11,000 SKUs. And every time someone calls in, we're going to kind of, tack $5 on. And so it makes it really complicated to have that customer service interaction. And so one of the things product folks can do really upstream to make that customer experience really great when a customer does pick up the phone and call is make that really, really simple so that the people that are calling actually have real problems that humans need to solve. Or there are very little problems and they're calling because Michael and Justin like to have a conversation on a Sunday night. And that's, an equally beautiful delight experience that drives customer experience, lifetime value, so on and so forth. So I think that that's one thing. The other thing is sometimes product people, designers, developers get really caught up in using kind of the new thing. And we saw this with chatbots early on. It's like, oh, we're going to solve all of our problems here. So, not everything needs a conversational interface, right? Some things are I log into an app and I see my bill and I pay it with Apple Pay. Like that's we don't need to have a conversation about that, right? There are other things that might maybe do need some back and forth and some banter and some clarity around a router or the type of phone you might want. That might be a delightful experience for discovery and some enrichment of information. And then pretty quickly you get into a place where you might need to talk to a human. So I think for me, it's using those tools in places where they make sense, but not over indexing on them and making sure that the product decisions, particularly pricing and products and services and SKUs and all that stuff, make what is traditionally a really complex industry really simple. Because at the end of the day, it's a pretty simple industry that has just been people just have added a tremendous amount of complexity to it over the years, right? I mean, if you think about it, it's you get a device, whether it's fixed or wireless, right? We provision you service and we take payment on your bill. Like that's it's the whole industry, but we somehow have made it wildly complicated with all of this tech and all of this bloat and all of these vendors. And so I think that's the success we saw in Ting on the mobile side, and one of the reasons why it was attractive for for Dish to take over that business last year in August and kind of pivoted it into being a platform business in service of them being the fourth carrier, and then on the fixed side, continuing to build Ting towns throughout the United States in places where the major players have left folks behind, and just haven't serviced core parts of the United States.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And what I love about Tucows is that typically, and you mentioned this, customer care are viewed as cost centers. And Ting, and perhaps it's similar to Zappos in that you have had product innovation that has cut out a lot of the traditional friction points that customers have. And what that's allowed, if I'm sort of hearing you correctly, is for Ting to invest in having that human to human interaction to deliver that magical, unexpected experience because you've cut out so much of the typical customer care issues that turn customer care into a cost center. Is that a fair synopsis?
100%. And look, I've only been at Tucows for 2 years, so in no way, shape, or form can I take any credit for all of that. Right? I just got here. The team that had built the mobile business, the MVNO business, starting in 2012 and then fixed in 2015, really focused on simplicity and making it easy and making the kind of mobile that makes sense, smarter mobile. And that was really around just like, hey, like pay for what you use, call us if you got any problems, we're here for you. And I think the folks that run our call center teams, our CXO organization, Ross, Tom, that squad, they've just hired really amazing humans that actually want to have great conversations. And that was one of the things that struck me because when I came on board, I was trying to figure out the same thing you were figuring out. I was like, I think you're the only telco that wants a phone call to go through. So let me understand what's going on. And you watch these folks have conversations and they're amazing. I'll give you one anecdote that I think speaks to this. I've since stolen this person away to be on the product organization because he's so amazing. But we had a gentleman that is still one of the most prolific MVNO and telecom device community members on Reddit. And people would go to him to say, "I've got this Sprint phone. What do I do with this? What do I do with it?" Right? Just on Reddit. And he was just spitting out content because he loves the space, right? And when he started, having more direct customer interactions, people would start ask for him, right? Hey, I've got this like mobile problem. I won't kind of give his name out in public, but can I talk to this person? And now you have this like beautiful thing where it's like people are calling Ting that aren't Ting customers that have a phone problem and then arriving at, well, maybe I should just do with these folks. Like, why would I, if I can call this person to unlock my phone and help me with this problem with my mother that has this older phone or whatever, maybe I should just switch my service. And it creates these like really evangelical, really passionate customers that are passionate about the money they save, but also passionate about the service that they
And I'm sure you made some enemies by stealing him away and taking him to the product.
get.
So, Tucows doesn't have a COO. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about that?
I would say that, I would say that right now, most of that is probably related to the fact that we have three distinct businesses, right? And that continues to be true and will be true in the future. So you've got, as you outlined before, we've got the domains business, and then we've got the MSC business, which is kind of this pivot out of MVNO into being, a software for telcos. And then we've got Ting ISP. And so, one of those businesses is pretty mature in domains, and the other two are hyper growth businesses. And so, right now, I think we've been fairly focused on product and engineering and customer service and just really building and running fast.
So, you all are about to get flooded with resumes from COOs. We'll be right back. This week's episode of Between Two COOs is brought to you by Running Remote, the world's premier remote work conference on building remote teams and businesses. Now in its fifth year, Running Remote is curated to teach you the secret strategies and tactics you can use the very next day to manage and grow your remote team. Incredible executives from companies like Cisco, Zoom, Citrix, Twitter, Upwork, Toyota, Automatic, and Pixar have graced the stage to share their vast knowledge. More than 6,000 leaders have attended Running Remote events, and now, after a brief virtual-only stint, Running Remote is back with a live in-person event on May 17th and 18th in Montreal, Canada. You can get 30% off tickets if you use my special coupon code, Between Two COOs, that's spelled BETWENTWOCOOS, at runningremote.com. See you there. So, listen, to the operation folks listening, how should we position our mindsets when thinking about the impact that AI can have on business operations outside of the front-facing customer experience? What should we embrace?
I would say that taking on an honest audit and stock of all the things that your shop does, and think about the places where more insight and a tighter feedback loop on that operation to, just this is a thing that happens between humans and some systems, and like what comes out of it, right? Is there room for that to be more efficient, and could it be more efficient not by better process, better human process, better communication, but simply by automating something, or simply by having better visibility into what that thing is doing? We're in this era of this AI hype cycle where uh, I think we're starting to get a little bit more honest with ourselves around what the current models can do. And I like to think about it like you're going bowling and you put up the bumper lanes. A lot of the models are super strong when it's clear what's being discussed, right? We're having a conversation around flying on an airplane, and we're going to stay in those bumper lanes, right? We're going to change our seat. We're going to ask about air miles. We're going to do all that. When we go outside that and we start talking about fruit, it becomes a bit more challenging, which is why I kind of, generalized AI as you walk up and talk to Alexa or anything out there is a real challenge. You can say anything to it. And so there's a challenge there. Well, the same thing is in systems, right? You kind of generally know what the system's supposed to do or what this ops person is, their day-to-day job. There's a lot of really great, models out there that can help optimize those workflows. I would say that's one big thing. The second thing I would say is as this becomes more pervasive, it spits off a tremendous amount of data and getting really good at understanding, hey, this is the data we should pay attention to, and this is the data that's just noise, will be super important for COOs, chief data officers, folks that are looking at optimizing a business to be more efficient. That's where I see a lot of people get hung up. They get kind of, drunk on the sauce of all the stuff coming out. Oh, we got all these models spitting out this churn model, or it's telling me we should, optimize this piece of this warehouse management system or whatever the thing is, and it's confirmation bias of kind of what's been put in, or it's just noise, and it's actually more inefficient than just operating without some fancy some fancy model in place.
So it sounds like don't get too hung up on the promise that AI will fix all operational problems. Be selective in the systems and the innovations that you take a look at.
Absolutely. It's like creativity, the individual human on how they drive their organization and the nuance with which you inspire another human in your organization to do a thing or to do a thing differently, that's almost impossible to automate, right? So there's so many important pieces to leadership and to motivating folks to get things done in an efficient way and in a way that's modern and thoughtful and future proof. Those things are not easily automated.
Well, that's the perfect segue, and you must have known that I wanted to go here next. In terms of leadership, how do you think about leadership and inspiring folks on the product side, but also as it relates to other roles? Because product isn't siloed anymore.
I have a pretty simple mantra, which is hire the smartest people in the world and get the hell out of their way. I see my job as working for my folks every day. Set the vision, be really crisp and clear on that, give them space to run and rock with the right swim lanes that we've set up organizationally. Leave a bit of ambiguity there, right? Sometimes people are going to bump into each other, and that's collaborative and good and healthy tension. And then block and tackle for them on things that are blocking them from getting work done. If we do parts 1 and 2 right, you have to do a lot less of 3. But I try to keep it pretty simple. I don't over-index on really complicated frameworks for tracking progress and all of that. I think sometimes I've made the mistake in the past that a misused asset, a misused human in a seat can be solved with process. It can't, right? It's a talent problem, not a process problem. Process is pretty easy when you have some rock stars. Then it's just getting them to follow the process because most rock stars don't want to color in between the lines, right? That's the problem that I would prefer to have, which is like, no, I need you to track OKRs. That's an important thing, right? And you often hear, I'm busy shipping, like, get out of my office, right? So I would say that those are the big pieces for me. And the last thing I would say there is, as businesses scale, and I've certainly seen this at every, whether it's starting a company and going from myself to couple hundred employees or to Verizon thousands of employees, and now at Tucows we've more than doubled the workforce right over the last couple of years, so we're north of 1,000 now. The human connection that you have with your team, who they are, why they get up, the duality of who they are as humans, that they're complex human beings just like yourself, dealing with n number of things out in the world at any given time, being really in tune with that and understanding where they might be coming from at a granular level, right? Like, okay, I know this about Michael. He's had these things. This is probably where he's coming from in this interaction. Is for me, I think, my most important task, because at any given time, that kind of acute moment of dealing with someone, making sure that they leave that with clarity, feeling good about the work they're doing, or they might not always feel good, but they're going to feel accountable and supported in hey, that didn't go well. How do we kind of move that forward? At scale and with remote work, I think we're seeing a lot of organizations struggle to find that. I mean, we've hired an enormous amount of people that have never met in person. And we're remote first, and we've got all the tools in place, and we believe in that for all the reasons why it's great. And the human connection, the things that we need to do to build relationships and build trust is something that keeps me up at night, and that's something that I'm constantly thinking about.
That's very interesting. So, in terms, you spoke about remote and building trust, right? I'm working currently with 150 folks spread across 40 countries. I've never met anyone at the company before. Building that trust and that sense of community and belonging is challenging. How have you all gone about it? And are there any tips that you might give to other leaders in a similar situation, which is quite common now?
One of the things that I think we got wrong in the beginning, and it was a well-intended approach on my part, I think. Was trying to recreate the water cooler conversations and the hangouts via virtual. But really what it did was just stress people out that they had to have more screen time. Like, let's have a joint coffee in the afternoon. And people were like, I just want to get off the screen for a bit and go pet my dog and play with my kids. So I really started kind of like walking that back and saying, hey, I actually think you're working more than you were before because you weren't commuting and you didn't have this time. So whenever you're not in a meeting or you're not working, like take that time to yourself to kind of refresh. And then, my goal was to build a little bit of humanity and back and forth at the beginning of a call or at the end of the call, leaving some space for that, even if it's a super tactical call. I actually think that over time, as the world opens up a little bit, can go away as well. And all of your human trust interactions happen a couple times throughout the year where the group does come together, right? So you kind of intentionally purpose build those human in-person moments throughout the year. It's going to vary by organization. Some are going to be we never come together. We come together once a year. Others are going to be once a quarter. Some will be maybe once a week, in a joint kind of office area. So I think each organization has to find that piece for themselves. You know, for me, it's about being intentional in every interaction. When we hire someone new, knowing as much as I can about them and understanding where they're coming from, because those can be just comments. They don't have to be big, like, "Hey, Michael, tell me about yourself. Let's do the whole thing." It's okay. I know something about you, and this becomes core to how I discuss work. Right? Okay, you're really big into chess, and so I'm bringing that in, or your daughter's a singer, and I'm bringing that in. Right? I think those are just like natural human things that not everyone is used to doing because some of us are introverted and extroverted and came from we are all, individually complex humans. But if you build little bits of those things in, the intentionality of that human connection is, I think super important. And then, there's maybe an obvious thing that I see, and I think, winning kind of solves everything sometimes. When you have tough relationships, when you're in a foxhole and you're working towards something and that thing shifts, it's unbelievable the amount of, trust and community that builds. And so sometimes it's working on something hard together, and it isn't the coffee, it isn't the we know something about each other's lives. It's that Michael and Justin went into a thing, it was really hard, and we came out with some scars, but we did it together. And now we've learned a lot. The amount of times that we've been on a late night phone call or, triaging something on the weekends, and we found out about a lot of each other because someone's kid runs in, or, you tell a joke because you're, sleep deprived. There's something in that I think, and obviously that comes from the startup manifesto, right? Of just building and moving fast and breaking things. But those things help curate community too.
So I've got to ask, I mean, how'd you know that I like to play chess and my daughter likes to sing? That's I
A lot of
a lot of
research.
research. There we go. There we go. So this is one of the questions I love asking COOs, and we experience crazy operational problems that pop up each day. And we've all had these moments where you have a new problem and you've thought, well, never thought I'd see that. Would it be safe to assume that you, as a chief product officer, have similar experiences? And if you do, would is there one that comes to mind that you can share with us?
Yes. I'm trying to sift through which
So
one.
it's true then.
It's absolutely true. I will tell you a story, and I would generalize it to protect all parties involved. I was working on a really big scaled product, and it had a bunch of humans involved that would, kind of both actively and passively be using the product. And the product got built, it got through all the regulatory things, we're ready to go. And the thing that was going to torpedo the product was whether the individual humans liked the photos of themselves that would show up on the product. And the group of humans had let's use the term, joint ability to say no to using the product. And it was one of those things where, there was regulatory components, and so it was going to be a really challenging national problem of, well, what if kind of one or two people say no, then it's kind of a no for the whole thing. And so we're going through this and working with some really smart folks on my end, and someone comes into my office the next day and says, I was thinking this morning, my son has picture day at school. Let's just do picture day. And I was like, what? And he's like, let's ship photographers all throughout the United States and everyone gets a new headshot. And I just thought, what's that gonna cost? And he just like, I've already math done, it makes sense. And I was like, great, do it. And then it became this delightful moment where people, all these folks that were going to have to use this product, going to have to, what was going to actually make their jobs better, removed that last thing of like, what's my picture going to look? And then everyone got new Facebook, and Instagram headshots that they're going to use for LinkedIn or whatever. And it solved the problem. I just never thought that was going to be a problem that I was going to need to solve when building a digital product.
Well, that's brilliant. I hope you are still working with that guy because that's a great solution. So, and this is one of the last questions for COOs going into a new business. What advice would you give them in their approach to partnering with a chief product officer?
Hmm. I would say do your best with the time that you have to understand the customer and whatever the customer is consuming from that business really, really well. Because, kind of core partnerships inside of business, particularly B2C businesses, that run well is when every part of that business understands why that customer, so to use the jobs to be done framework, why is that customer hiring us? Like, what are they hiring us for? And when you understand that, it informs so much of what comes into the ops, what comes into the people team, what comes into finance, right? Like the whole shebang. If you don't understand that, I think that's where people get sideways on stuff where, you know, well, why are we doing it this way, right? Couldn't it be done this way? But not understanding how that might downstream impact the customer. And most good product folks are, you know, customer champions, right? So they're going to think most, kind of first and foremost about how the customer is going to experience that thing, and then that's going to inform all the decisions, that kind of go down the line. So I think that would be my biggest thing. Obviously, like it's going to vary by company and by person, and frankly, you might have a really great COO and not such a great CPO. So it might not, it might not even be the case that you are getting a customer first approach. So, but yeah, I would say understand the customer, and it'll help inform all the decisions you make going forward.
Fantastic. Well, there it is, everyone. Make sure you pay attention to the customer, get in there first, and make sure you understand the value that the company is bringing and how the teams are working towards that. Well, Justin, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. What's the best way for people to keep up with you and what your team are working on?
Probably Twitter, Twitter, LinkedIn. Twitter's Justin M. Riley. Twitter's Justin, or LinkedIn's Justin Riley.
Easy enough. There you have it. Twitter, Justin M. Riley. There you go. So thanks for listening. Justin, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate you being here. And Tune in next time for our next COO chat on Between Two COOs. And be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. Visit Between Two COOs for more information. And if you have a minute, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and tell others about the show so they can get great advice from phenomenal COOs, or in this case, Chief Product Officers. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Between Two COOs. Tune in next time, and until then, so long.